how did I figure out I wanted to go into ICAC? And I'll tell you, I was leaving my desk one time to go do something, and I saw Bruce at the copier, and he was making copies, but he was in like a Hawaiian shirt and shorts and flip-flops, and he had a beard. And I was like, Bruce, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm making copies for a case. I'm like, bro, you come in here on your vacation or something to do that? And he's like, no, that's what I wear to work. And I was like, I want to wear that to work. I want to wear flip-flops and shorts and a Hawaiian shirt. And he goes, and his words to me were, be careful what you ask for. And the reason it sticks with me is because I was late to the game. I didn't learn about it fast enough, and I couldn't take action fast enough, and as a result, a child was victimized by an offender who came here from another state. Like, there are videos that I have seen that absolutely haunt me. The one thing, if there's anybody listening that's in law enforcement that has a desire to get into this arena, I strongly encourage it, because it's very satisfying and rewarding to put someone in a way that will never have the opportunity to hurt another kid. I would just recommend the volume. Turn the volume down. Don't listen, because the video in itself is horrific. But when you hear what's going along with the video, it will make your stomach turn. It'll make you throw up.
You're listening to the ATO Bridging the Divide podcast, brought to you by the Assist the Officer Foundation.
Since 1999, the ATO has given assistance to the first responder community, and now we want to give them a platform to hear their incredible stories.
We also want to hear the stories of the many people that support us.
Our community is small, but it is strong.
We have differences. We don't always agree, and we all make mistakes.
But together we can grow, we can heal,
And we can learn from those mistakes.
and together we can bridge the divide.
Welcome back, ATO family. I'm Joe King. I'm sitting with Kent Wolverton. Today we have a very special guest co-host, Sergeant Jessica Criddle. She came back for more. I want to give the listener a warning on today's episode, as the material will be very heavy and shocking and disturbing to some, including other officers and first responders. I'll just say that all listeners will be disturbed on some levels, that this kind of crime goes on, and it goes on to the most innocent kind of victim. January 1, 1983 is considered the birthday of the internet, but it was made available to the public in April of 1993. The World Wide Web was announced. And with this revolution in communication and worldwide connectivity came the criminal element, the downside, as it always does. Today's episode will be topic-based and will feature a guest you've heard before on this show, the great Garland PD detective, Tony Godwin. He's been with Garland over 30 years. He has 18 years of experience in investigating ICAC, Internet Crimes Against Children. Today we'll dive in, break down this topic, and profile some of these predators to inform the community and also other first responders. Because this unit is still somewhat secretive within each department. We have our own too here in Dallas. We want to inform parents of what to look for so that these predators cannot prey on their children. With all that being said, Detective Godwin, welcome to the show.
I appreciate you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yep, that's for round two.
Yeah.
We don't have Clint here to punch in the crotch, so
yeah.
It's going to be you.
Well, I'm sure there'll be other opportunities.
Yeah. So we do, you listen to our show. We do a lot of story time based on individuals, and
right.
We touched on your career and also your podcast, Catfish Cops, but I want this to be more topic-based, like our Dynamic Warrant episodes, because there is so much that I don't even know, and that's why Sergeant Criddle, I think she was crucial to be in here, because she has actually worked this unit. In her episode, she talked about a case that haunted her.
Yeah.
And we're going to get into some of that with you, but I want you to kind of break down as much as you can without showing all of your cards, because,
Sure.
We're still out here. We do. You have a mission. We all have a mission to protect the integrity of any investigation. But we want to give the listeners, we want to raise awareness and also just kind of get some background on how this started and how it's evolved and where you're at now and your involvement, because you were at the forefront.
Sure, absolutely.
All right, 1998, the United States Department of Justice began an Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, ICAC, and it tasked the ever-growing problem involving the sexual exploitation of children via the Internet. And then after that was created, am I right, did it basically spawn to local jurisdictions and state agencies? Right.
The ICAC task force nationally was formed in order to combat a lot of the online exploitation that was going on. And it is consistently growing and growing from there based on the amount of work that comes in and, getting more people trained up to do this.
Well, I imagine just the evolution. You've done it 18 years, just the evolution of that was going on. And actually everybody has gotten more familiar because when, the World Wide Web popped up, people probably didn't think it was going to last even.
Right.
And now you got people that are becoming more involved and criminals will find a way. They always find a way to work any system to their advantage and get what they want out of it.
Right.
And they've done the same with this. So, how long have you been with Garland? Over 30 years?
30 years, yeah.
Okay. How much longer are you doing?
2 maybe.
Why are you winking at me? No, I'm just kidding. So, when you got to Garland, the listener heard, you added so much to Clint's episode, Clint McNair, because you're, best friends for all this time and classmates. And, we kind of got into what you like to do when you were out in the streets and rookies. But we just barely touched on what you do, your full-time job now, and what you may not call yourself an expert, but you're an expert at this topic.
Yes, I have received that designation officially a few times in court, probably 5 or 6 times, state and federal courts. So in some areas, yes, I would be considered an expert, but I do have a lot of experience in this area.
Well, God bless you, and I'm sorry that you have to. You've had that much experience.
I appreciate that
because I gave a warning, and I'm going to give a warning on this episode description because there are some heavy. This is really heavy and just really awful. But thank God there's people like you, Sergeant Criddle, when you did it that to get some semblance of justice, because that's all you're really getting. So when you got to when in Garland, they started up ICAC. What was the unit state then? How did that look? Were you there when it started, or was it?
I was there when it started. Okay. The very original guy, his name's JD. It was kind of kicked off and spawned through one of our lieutenants who had heard about it as it kicked up, and it was way different back then. Like very, very little people, very few people knew anything about what was going on, where they were in the department. Like they were hidden and kind of secreted off into some closet somewhere, literally. And so there really was no ever talk or mention about it. Nobody really knew. Very rarely you might hear about something in a shift report, like some kind of report you've never even seen before. Like, what is that, And then JD ended up moving on to something else. And the guy that took his place, his name is Bruce Marshall. He's my mentor in this field. He came in and boy, he hit the ground running. Like he had new ideas and new thoughts and on how to do things and just thinking outside the box. And he was amazing at the job. And he stayed in there for a very long time. He was sort of the impetus for me even having an interest in getting into the unit. I was a case carrying detective at the time. I was carrying kid cases. And so I was already exposed to that. And it's not something I chose. I was just put in there when I got in the unit. And, but when I saw what ICAC was doing and how it was happening, there's actually kind of a funny story to this because I've been asked this before. How did I figure out I wanted to go into ICAC? And I'll tell you, I was leaving my desk one time to go do something, and I saw Bruce at the copier, and he was making copies. but he was in like a Hawaiian shirt and shorts and flip-flops, and he had a beard. And I was like, Bruce, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm making copies for a case. I'm like, bro, you come in here on your vacation or something to do that? And he's like, no, that's what I wear to work. And I was like, I want to wear that to work. I want to wear flip-flops and shorts and a Hawaiian shirt.
Yeah.
He goes, and his words to me were, be careful what you ask for. And a couple of years, a year or so later, I got fortunate enough to get pulled into the unit. And he was absolutely right. Be careful what you ask for.
So you dealt with child crimes before. What were the child abuse type?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Primarily sexual abuse and physical abuse of kids. We handled, because, we're not as huge as Dallas, we do specialize. So if you work kid crimes, you work them all, from runaways up to, the worst things that happen to kids, physical abuse. And so for that reason, like I said, I didn't pick it. I would have gone anywhere they asked me to go, and that just happened to be where the opening was. But I saw the impact you could make. You can really empower kids to get back on track, and you could really put bad people away that need to be put away.
So did you have kids at the time you were investigating these child crimes before? So
I did. Yeah.
How did you wrestle with that in your mind and come to grips with, you have to separate one from the other, and everybody, you're human.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are certainly aspects of that type of work and exposure to that kind of material and the tragic things that kids are going through that affects you personally. I feel like I'm really grounded in my faith. I'm really grounded with my family. I don't pull punches. Maybe it's to the detriment of my kids. They're all adulting now. I got one left that's not there yet, but close. They may have a difference of opinion about my openness and honesty with them about what was going on and what's really happening, because I didn't want them to go into life blind to the fact that, you can't live your life in a bubble. You have to know that there's an awful lot of good. There's a tremendous amount of good, but there's an element of evil that exists, and you need to be aware of what that is. And so that's how I just approached it from young ages. And like I said, they may have issues now.
Did you ground them from having any computer in their vision until they're 22?
You think that would be the case, and but no. But on the flip side of that, they didn't go unfettered access. Like I would, back then, I could limit the number of minutes. I could limit the number of messages. I could limit different things. Just technology was prehistoric, I think.
Yeah, it was like back in FlashNet days and AOL Messenger.
Right.
And so 3 hours to download a pic.
Yeah, and so what
kind of pics were you looking for, Joe?
Only the best kind. The wholesome,
classic
very
cars.
wholesome. Yeah. Norman Rockwell paintings. That's all I look at.
Yeah, the classic defeat. Sure. They get to a certain point and then they stop downloading because your dial-up connection was terrible. Yeah. Right? But yeah, I definitely would keep an eye on things of what was going on, where they were going, and that's always been the case.
I bet you were. So you got into computer where you go from child abuse and that child crimes to internet crimes against children. And the internet, it was out there, it was established, but it's still growing and evolving to this day.
Yeah.
So did you have much knowledge of computers in your own personal life, or did you have a...
Absolutely not.
Okay.
I was, and I tell this often. I go around the country and I teach other law enforcement how to do the job that I do, and that's really where my passion is. But I tell them all the time, like, I have people say, hey, I don't even understand computers. I'm like, don't let that be the hurdle. It's just a tool. It's just a tool that you're using. Like, literally, it's like your pepper spray and your asp or baton or whatever. It's just a tool on your belt. And so you can learn it if you want to learn it. And so I was in the same shape. I could send an email. I could I could probably pay a bill online at the time, and that was even a little much. But absent of that, I couldn't do anything with a computer. I definitely knew how to turn one on.
So working with the early on, in the ICAC, you starting off doing it, and your mentor, I mean, it changed probably within a matter of a couple of years of when he started teaching you to what you were stuck with. So what were some of the investigative techniques you did back then?
You know, I'll be honest, in the early days in like 07, 08, like it was fish in a barrel. It literally was. Like the Yahoo chat rooms were the craze back then. And so you could literally go into a chat room. And at the time when I started, the chat rooms were named. If they were created by a user, they had very specific names. And so some of them you could just tell right off the bat, like it was going to be, you know, related to child exploitation, like daddy daughter, or, you know, some kind of topic that just seeing the topic or the name of the group would make you cringe. But then Yahoo tried to clean that up, and so they just gave them generic numbers. And so you're just, you know, you'd enter in a term, like I would just go into Texas, and there'd be 50 rooms for Texas. And I could just jump into a room, and I wouldn't do anything. I'd just sit in a room. And then all of a sudden, bam, 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 all these messages start flowing in. And you know within a minute or so whether a case is going to move forward, like really very rapidly.
So you got in some of these rooms and just... did you have a certain username, like just a certain username that was almost like bait for a fish? I mean, was it that it would draw them to it?
Yeah, that's evolved over time.
Right.
There's been some evolution in some of that. Honestly, the number one factor back then was to have a name that was high up in the alphabet. And the reason for that is this. Back then, and because it was so popular, you were listed in a room alphabetically. So you were always sort of at the top of the list, always.
Fascinating.
And so generally, I would create a profile. Didn't really matter what your profile name was. Could be anything. Some school of thought would think, well, you throw a number in there to represent what age you are. And there's some – that's definitely not the – situation anymore. This is all very, very old school thinking, but alphabetically was really the key. So that's what I would do.
Wow. I remember those early Yahoo chats and Dallas chat rooms and AOL chat rooms.
Right.
And, you know, I remember it was in one, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Somebody sends me a message, and it was a female. It had a female name. It's probably you sitting there. So it sends me a message, and it just said ASL with a question mark.
Right.
And I sit back in my chair, and I kind of rub my chin. I go, yeah, ASL. I was like, I don't know what ASL is, but I'm into it. I'm just going to say yes. So I send back just yes. They send back age, sex, location typed out with a question mark, and then I just logged out. I just exited that room.
Goodbye.
Yeah, I'll see you. Yeah,
that's not the room for you.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was just I didn't know what it meant, but yeah. I'm down. I'm down for it.
Yeah.
Whatever ASL is. Yeah. All the time, always.
Yeah, lots of little acronyms like that. That's when I said you would know very quickly if it was going to continue or not, because that was always the first thing, ASL. And if I said I'm 12. Either the response is going to be, oh, that's cool. Do you like older guys or gals or whatever it is? Or it was the extreme opposite. What are you doing? You're too young. Get out of here. And you're blocked or banned or something like that.
But here's my phone number.
Yeah.
So what are some of the biggest challenges early on you were finding to try to actually catch these folks, you know?
So the big misconception a lot of people have, especially when I go teach other law enforcement, is what you are allowed to do. We have a national standards, ICAC standards, and I am wickedly strict to the standards. Rules are in place about things we can and can't do, and you don't deviate from those. And if you do, you're doing it wrong. And so the misconception, I guess, is that people believe that, hey, we just go online and say, hey, I'm a 12-year-old and anybody want to have sex. And that is absolutely not the case, right? We're not looking to entrap anybody. So we do have to follow the practices that are put in place, and they've evolved over the years. So it's a little difficult. The other misconception is you just jump right in, and you don't. I couldn't file a case. I couldn't even work a case and file a case for close to 18 months back then, because at that time there were core courses that you had to take as an investigator working ICAC and part of the ICAC task force. And so if you didn't have those core courses under your belt And the upside is the courses are free. The downside is the courses are all over the country. So your department is having to fund you to stay in a hotel and have per diem and fly you to some other state.
Wear Hawaiian shirts.
Yeah, wear Hawaiian shirts and then learn how to, be a kid online.
Well, what kind of did you have support from the department, like when it first initially hit? I mean, was it because it was new in infancy state?
Oh, absolutely. I've had support. Like I cannot speak highly enough for the Garland Police Department. Like I have not gone without anything that I've ever needed or wanted. They have made some accommodation to make that happen. And so, when outside looking in and you have other detectives in other units who see that I'm traveling for 18 months going to different places and doing all this schooling, but the situation was just different. It was just what was required for the job, and so I just embraced it for what it was. It wasn't like I wasn't doing anything for the 18 months. I was reading cases. I was going through Bruce's cases, and I've had him come in and just mentor me and give me advice and guidance, and I would just practice. Nothing to make a case. I just practice and just get the feel for it because it's a whole different environment.
Was it just y'all two?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I've been on the island by myself for quite a while.
And you're still okay, we're going to get into how it's grown and evolved. That just baffles me. I mean, because the reason I ask about support because excuse me, here in Dallas, I mean, there's a lot of calls holding all the time, or there's something going on over here, and they start looking at every unit to try to trim the fat off of, and that never was like, well, is this really needed over here?
I thought it would happen, simply because I physically remember getting in the office, which again was way down a hallway near nobody in a former closet that had been turned into an office. And I just remember sitting there and thinking, wow, like we didn't really have reactive type cases where parents were, we had them, but they were really far and few between, where a parent intercepts something on their kid's device or something and calls the police. Like those were really far and few between. And so back then it was a proactive job. Like everything you did was what you generated. And so I internally had some struggle with that because I thought, nobody knows what I'm doing here. Like I have a boss that my boss knows because I'm telling them what's going on. And so I literally started a Word doc. And for my first 2 years in the unit, every day I just start a new date and everything I did.
Journal
I was just journaling everything I did because I thought, nobody knows what I'm doing. There's no metric to measure what's going on. And if they come to me to say, what the heck have you been doing? Like, we didn't even know you were in this closet kind of a thing. And I could say, well, here's what I've been doing. And so it was really up to me to it was probably paranoia on my part. But,
but it's a valid paranoia in this profession because you have bosses that initially are supportive. They promote, they retire, you get somebody else come in, and there might be a time where you're asking, even like with this new, I talked about this new wellness unit, we're just starting up. You're going to have to show something later on down the road for somebody to show you, why you're needed.
Yeah, because, we work based on a reporting system just like every other agency. And if you were to run stats on my employee number for a particular month or a 2-month period, you're going to be like,
guy's a slug.
Yeah, he ain't doing nothing. Where it's quite the contrary, All
right, speaking of that, can you kind of walk us through how a case comes to you and how it starts from just walk the listener through it, and even me, I don't have a clue. Sergeant knows, just A to Z.
Okay, so I'll talk in the realm of reactive cases, meaning mom or dad are trying to do their due diligence and they are looking at their kid's device or their phone or their laptop or their tablet, something along those lines, and they intercept something on there that they believe to be highly inappropriate. Whether it's imagery, videos, communications, or just a general ooky feel of what they're seeing or encountering. And so a couple different things happen depending on who has discovered the material. Moms and dads do things very, very differently. Most of the times, moms will call the cops. And so let's just run it through that. They call the police, they make a police report. We have now currently in today's time frame, we have an information report called Information ICAC. We've never had that in the past. That's only been around a couple years.
Wow.
And that's because of the need to address, statistic wise, what we've got coming in and all that. And so that report gets then assigned to me. It involves a child, it involves the internet or a suspect on the internet. That's my purview. And so when I get that case, I obviously read the reporting officer's report of things. I try to determine, okay, where's the device? That's the number one key for us in today's environment. I will call the person who reported, mom or dad or whoever, and say, look, you pay for the device. This is your device. Yes, it is. You allow your child to use this device. Yes, it is. I need your permission to examine that device. And so that's typically what happens next. I give them I don't talk to the kid. We have a whole process for that at the Children's Advocacy Center. There's a whole MDT process that we use. I'm a firm believer in that process.
What does that stand for?
The Dallas Children's Advocacy Center. And so that CAC process of having kids forensically interviewed is how every agency should be doing business.
Dallas does it that way too.
Yeah, we do it that way.
Absolutely. Listen, I cut my teeth with DPD in the beginning. I was down here with old heads like Greg Duggar and Lori Rangel and Joe Corden and all them. Like I literally cut my teeth down here, and Byron Fassett. Like I spent almost a month down here in the beginning just watching and learning, being a sponge. And so essentially once that phone is dumped and I have some sort of idea, the key thing typically is preservation of evidence. And that means if there's online accounts, that's the kid's account and the suspect's account. And being able to determine that early on is sometimes a challenge because a lot of kids aren't really forthcoming with information once they've gotten caught by a parent. But it evolves. Sometimes the kids are totally on board and they're scared of what happened and tell their parents these are the accounts and whatnot. So once everything is preserved, then we start to look into what kind of offense do we have.
What kind of age range basically do you see this coming up as far as when a child is using a device to do this kind of communication?
Sadly, it's now reaching ages in elementary school. Sadly, primarily it's middle school or high school. We have tons and tons of cases with them, but it is definitely reaching elementary school age. For some reason, people have felt or believed that, given a 8 or 9 year old access to a device that can go anywhere in the world in their pocket seems to be the norm, and that's short-sighted.
That's just the world we live in. And when you first started, you didn't have the smartphones. You didn't have the
flip phones.
Flip phones or Motorola's, and you didn't have iPads and all these different various devices. So when, say, a parent calls you up and says, "Hey," the mother, because the dad will probably want to go over there and kick down the door.
That's the big differences.
Yeah. So you have a device. When you come and collect them, would you collect like the phone, an iPad, and then say a computer too? Because usually the kids will have multiple ones.
Yeah. Gone are the days, depending early on, like it used to be very common for us to take our mobile device and connect it to a computer, backing things up but those days are gone. That doesn't even happen. Most people in today's environment, they don't even power a phone off, ever. Let alone to get updates or do anything like that. But yeah, if it warrants it, then certainly we'll get phones, we'll get iPads, we'll get computers. I work in a lab. I do computer forensics and cell phone forensics. While it's not my most favorite thing to do anymore, I do have a guy that is there to help with that now. And that's a big win for us. But that is paramount for us to move forward, is to gather the evidence, preserve it, to determine what do we have, and then make efforts to identify the person. And I try to make sure that parents understand that that's a process. We issue preservations on accounts, and then we issue legal process to get them identified. And that can take 6 or 8 weeks to get the return back. And so, it's not an immediate, you give me the phone today and I dump it and I'm going to be able to know who this guy is tomorrow. Certainly those chances exist, but more often than not, it's a process. And so they need to understand what that process is. and be on board with it. The other factor that I always tell every parent is think about what you do with your old phones at home. At my house, we have a drawer in the kitchen, and it's full of phones, right? We upgrade a phone, we throw the old one in there, blah, blah, blah. And so after a period of time, there's 8 or 9, 10 different phones in there. I can't
even close the drawer.
Yeah, I got flip phones still in there, right? Well, guess what? Those phones still work, right? If they power up and they can connect to Wi-Fi, they work. So when we give advice to parents to say, hey, make sure that your child doesn't have access to any kind of electronics, and they always say, oh, no, we're going to keep this, or we're going to hide this, or we're going to secure this. And I say, don't forget that drawer of old stuff, because it all still works, right? Secure it.
That's fascinating. So you get a device, and then you have to dump it, and you start combing through it, and it could be 6 to 8 weeks or not longer. What does it look like then as far as to further this investigation?
So then identification of the suspect is priority, right? And then it's got to be determined, is this a kid? Is this an adult? If it is an adult, which the overwhelming majority of the time it is an adult, where are they? Are they local? Are they international? Are they hiding themselves to look like they're international when they're actually local? There's a lot of processes that go in play to figure that out. And then once we determine where that person is, we will, make some efforts to make a case, right? We're either I've had cases where people are out of state, and I've had them extradited back here with the DA's permission and prosecuted. No problem. I had one with a guy in Phoenix, 2 11-year-old girls. And it was an introduction. One 11-year-old girl met him, talked to him, was exploited by him, introduced her best friend to the same guy. And so he victimized 2 11-year-olds. And, he doesn't get a pass because he's in Phoenix, Arizona. Yeah. Sorry, buddy. Guess what? We'll prosecute you here. And I present that case to the DA, and I explain to them, and this is where he is, but this is what he's doing. And so that's the beauty of the task force. That's the beauty of the ICAC task force, because I know I can pick up the phone and call the ICAC in Phoenix and say, hey, if this guy's not on your radar already, he's about to be. This is what I need.
Now, have you noticed that with the evolution of the internet and everything that goes on with that, earlier we talked about the chat rooms were kind of a place where you could find people.
Yeah.
It seems like every app now has some sort of chat feature on it.
Yep. Every single app that exists
so
has the ability for chatting.
Has that made it harder or easier to find people?
It depends on the app. There's obviously limitations. If I'm online, purporting to be a 12-year-old girl, obviously anything with live streaming is a little difficult, because as soon as they see this ugly mug of mine, they're going to know something's up, right? But there are definitely ways to work around things and places to go and chatting options and alternatives. The other really scary part that I don't think parents take into account is a lot of applications now. I mean, the chatting aspect and the live streaming is all got a creep factor to it. But what they don't take into account is the good portion of these apps that geolocate their kid. And so that geolocation can put a suspect in your neighborhood. Some of it's so accurate, it can put that suspect on your street. And so if you think about it in the context of like, oh, my kid's just using this app, what's the danger? They don't know the person in real life or whatever. Do you want that person in your neighborhood? Do you want that person on your street?
The dad part of me does.
Yeah,
I'd love to find that guy.
Yeah.
So is there, do you all use any AI, any artificial intelligence for your chats?
There is some component of that, and that is evolving.
Yeah.
I just had gone to do some training in Utah, and I had some conversations with the ICAC commander out there, and they're they're revising some of the new standards to kind of address some of those issues, because technology today is, my gosh, it is worlds different from where it was in 06. And so AI is going to play a huge role, and hopefully those standards that they allow us to use and go by are gonna be modified and changed to allow that, because it's just a perception thing from understanding the technology and using it to save kids, because how can that be bad?
Do you have to do a lot of updated training because of the technology
For sure.
evolution?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I'm always taking a webinar here or there, or trying to attend a class. The crimes conference is amazing.
Yeah.
You can, attend that, and
networking too.
Oh,
Just
absolutely.
networking alone
Yeah,
is
that's the best part.
Oh, that is absolutely hands down the best part is the networking. But the training hours you can get, the updated information, the technology, the contacts, it's amazing.
So if your types of crime had categories that you investigate, can you kind of tell the listener what types of crimes you're actually, we're saying exploitation, but that can mean a lot of things.
Yeah.
So what can you kind of describe the types of crime that you investigate?
Primarily, it's online solicitation of a minor, and that's a felony in Texas. That can be a second degree or third degree, depending on the age of the person that's involved.
Real quick, I want to jump.
Yeah.
You said it's a felony in Texas. Is it not a felony in other states?
It is a felony in just about every other state.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just some states have weird setups.
Class, yeah, felony,
different classes and things like that.
Okay.
It is primarily a felony, as far as I know, everywhere else. I'm not aware of anywhere else where it's not. But there are other states that have not lesser included, but lesser offenses based on the degree of what happens, or so it's a little different. But here in Texas, it's a felony, second degree or third degree for online solicitation of a minor. Federally, it's the same as enticement. And then our other biggest hit is, and that we deal with the most, is probably possession or promotion of child pornography. Statutorily, it's called child pornography. I'm not a fan of the term child pornography. We made some efforts to change legislation, to change terminology, because kind of globally it's referred to as child sex abuse material, which it really is. Mm-hmm. The term child pornography, the word pornography just assumes consent, and obviously we can't have a consensual situation with a child and anything in that arena. And so I just think we need to update things, and we'll see if that gets done. That's one of my goals before I retire.
Good. Yeah, that's good. Well, you're the guy to lead that.
Done.
So have you actually gone to D.C. for some of the legislation? I know they have the updates sometimes when they have the commanders meetings.
I have not. I am going to D.C. I think next month, but it's not for that sort of situation. But we have done that on the state level here in Texas. Myself and my podcast partner from another agency, we have been working on this for a long time and been back and forth. At the last legislative session, we, with the help of a very good friend of ours, Sonia Ryan, which is a whole nother story in itself that is amazingly interesting. She walks the walk and talks the talk. She's her survivor. Her daughter was the first child murdered in Australia's history after being groomed online and kidnapped and murdered. Anyway, she's a huge advocate. She's here in Texas now, and her right off the bat, what can I do to help? And we're like, well, we'd like to make some changes. And so she talked a lot of mess. And I'll be honest, she's like, okay, I'm going to get us a meeting with the governor. And in my mind, I'm thinking, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way that's happening, right? Then a couple of weeks later, hey, what are you doing on the 20th? I got us a 2-hour meeting. And I'm like, what? And so I didn't even tell my agency about it. A couple people peripherally knew that we had been trying to work on the legislative change, but we were making no traction anywhere. And then Sonia kicks the door down at the Capitol, and we made very good progress at the last session. We made it through the House. We wanted to make tweaks to the child pornography law and the online solicitation law. There's a little bit of a hiccup in that law that needs to be adjusted. Anyway, so
what is the holdup? You know things that I do not know about the verbiage. What is the hiccup when it comes to
with
changing
online?
it?
Yeah, with online. Oh, what the hiccup is? I don't know. We made it through the House and we passed, unanimously there, but it stalled on the Senate floor along with 800 or 900 other bills in Texas, and I don't think it had anything to do with the bills themselves. Honestly,
other things were priority in their mind, and they just that's what happened.
And it's just a machine. Like if you've ever been a part of the legislative process, it's a machine I didn't know anything about, and man, it's a whole different world down there of how that happens. It amazes me that bills get passed at all with the way things go through committees and different things like that. But it's just some tweaks on existing laws, online solicitation of a minor. There's a clause in there, essentially a lot of people, and I do parent presentations, a lot of parents don't know, like, I'll mention something called what we call a charm school case. And a charm school case is where an adult is offering up a child for sexual purposes, right? And so when you tell a person that's an adult, they give you this puzzled look like, what? What are you talking about? That sounds insane. And the reality is it's very true. Step parents or stepdad who offers up a stepkid, a grandfather offers up a grandkid. Sometimes a mother will offer up her own kids. And sometimes it's for financial gain. Sometimes it's for other reasons. But it exists. And so when I talk to people about that, when we apply the law to that, online solicitation of a minor, the law currently states that the offending party, the suspect, must communicate with the child. And so we just wanted to say any person. Instead of the child, it's any person. Because currently, if you work a charm school case proactively, if I go out there and say I'm a stepdad and I've got my stepdaughter available for whatever in some of these platforms where that's a very normal conversation, and somebody takes me up on that offer, I have to do some creative charging because I would never let them talk to my actual child. Like, what are you talking about?
Right.
No, it's not how this works.
So that's how you do. You pose as in some cases you pose as
sometimes
as a child, and you're chatting, and then you kind of throw that bait out there, and are some of these cases that you do this, that you actually have identified a specific target, and then you go out and then
Certainly.
you pose and then go out. Okay.
Sometimes, and the only thing I'll challenge you on is that term baiting. We don't bait anybody. We just put ourselves out there, right? By us simply being present in platforms or applications or anything else, just by necessity of being there, doesn't cross any threshold of entrapment of any sort of way. We just put ourselves out there and we just wait to be contacted. Sometimes we are made aware. We get a call from another location, another agency,
Arizona,
another ICAC that says, hey, is this guy on your radar? Because if not, you should take a look at him. And so we may go and do something proactively, take a look at the profile or interact in some way with the profile, like something or favorite something or whatever, something minuscule, right, to see if that prompts some sort of communications or response. Mm-hmm. It's not always that way. There are times, and the one thing that I think the public wouldn't understand, and I gave a presentation at Texas State yesterday to a bunch of CJ students, and I was trying to tell them, I was like, everything that I do in an undercover capacity is based on a real case, is based on a real child victim case. Or if it's in the instance of a parent that offered up a child, it's based off of that, because we know that happens. We know that kids are doing this. We know that parents, unfortunately, are putting kids in this kind of situation. So we base it all off reality. The just average public just doesn't know about it,
Yeah. So is it common to have one suspect with multi-state charges that, like, let's say somebody calls you in Arizona and say, hey, look at this guy.
Yeah.
And then you start up an investigation and you could find, is that common?
It's not uncommon.
Okay.
And there is some crossbreeding that goes around. And certainly when we see an offender who has a job that takes them from state to state, truck drivers.
Yeah.
And I'm not knocking truck drivers. Right. Don't take it as that. I'm
just saying they travel more.
People are traveling more. People that do sales nationwide and things like that. There's definitely a propensity for that. I can tell you a quick story if you want. Sure. of a case. So as an example, there was a young girl in my city, a 12-year-old, and that young lady was online and talking to what she believed to be a kid, 16-year-old kid. And, the communications were normal, regular exchange of normal photos. And then there's some other photos that are sent that were not appropriate by the suspect, and then a desire for him to receive those kind of photos back. And so she reciprocates. Initially says, no, I'm not going to do it. Then she reciprocates. And so once she does this, it just opens up a floodgate. Now I want more and more and more. And so more things are going back and forth. And none of it's good. None of it's legal. It's not legal for kids to do that. And I get that a lot, this look, really? Anyway, the long and short of it is things that she sends include pictures and videos. In one of the videos, he sees an infant. She's babysitting an infant at the time. And so the conversation takes a wicked turn. I want you to do this. I want you to do this. Very descriptive things to this baby.
Yeah.
And this girl says, no, I'm not going to do any of that. But eventually extortion happens, right? And we call it sextortion in this arena. Well, you'll do this, or I will show this to your mom. And here's her Facebook page, by the way, and a screenshot of this, or I'll do this, or I'll put you on blast. That's what kids fear, exposure. And so she does things that are just unthinkable,
and they
unspeakable.
capitulate because of fear.
And takes pictures and videos of all of it, right? And then there's some other aspects of it that take place that I don't think your listeners want to hear about. I won't even discuss that part. And she gets to a point where she's like, I'm not doing anything else. He's asking for more and more and more. The last line in the sand was, I want you to carve my name in your breasts. I want you to carve my name on your thigh or your stomach or your arm. And she says, you do what you got to do. I'm not doing that.
Was this over a certain length of time?
One day.
One day, all of this?
One day. And so she literally walks to a corner store and calls 911 and self-reports, and says, this is what just happened. I need help. And so out of fairness, that's not fairness. This girl had some frequent flyer miles with the police. She was previously a victim. She did not have a good support system, so officers were aware of her. They got there. Long and short of it is she makes some statements that indicate she needs a medical evaluation, and so they take her to a location for that. And I get the case 2 days later. I just learn about it. I see it in the shift report. I'm like, what the heck? I read about it, and I get permission to dump the phone, and I dump the phone, and I identify a guy in the United Kingdom over in the UK. And so most agencies anywhere in the U.S., if it takes an international nexus, it probably ends right there when nobody goes forward. But I had the displeasure of seeing the communications and the tone and the content of what he's saying and the control, the power, the manipulation that he put on this 12-year-old girl. And I know in my mind, I'm like, there's no way this is a 16-year-old kid. I know this is not a 16-year-old kid. And so I'm thinking, okay, I got legal process back that said he's over in the UK, and I'm like, is he just hiding? Is he hiding himself? Is he making it look like he's in the UK, but he's actually here? And I'm trying to ferret that out. And so I essentially start to research the company, the company that I identify as that he's using. And I'm thinking, okay, is this a VPN or whatever? And I'm looking online, and I'm really not able to determine that. And so I find about 5 or 6 email addresses for the company. And I'm not even kidding you. Like I told this story yesterday at Texas State. I literally, it's like close my eyes and boink, I point on the map and I land on an email address. And so that's the email that I send. I send it to this guy. And I'm thinking, hey, this is who I am. This is what I'm trying to identify. Is this a VPN or is this a residential customer? Is this a mobile customer? What is this? And within about 20 minutes, I get a phone call. I see the caller ID on my phone is about 20 digits long. I'm like, what is this? I pick up the phone. It's like, Tony, it's Nigel. And I'm like, Nigel? Like, where are you from? And he's like, yeah. And he's hello. I'm in the UK. And I'm like, no way. And he goes, I can help you. And I'm like, talk to me. And he goes, listen, I just retired from NCA, which is the National Crime Agency, their version of the FBI over there. And he goes, and I worked child exploitation for like 15 years. And he goes, and now I work for this company, just something to do. And he goes, I can help you. And he goes, this is a residential customer. And so I know I'm going along around the bus on this, but we get him identified, right? NCA adopts a case on it. They, within 4 or 5 days, they've done surveillance. They get him positively identified, and they kick his door. They arrest him, and they find his devices, which I gave them the devices he was using. I knew all of that through what I was doing on my end, and they found all of my victim's material, all her videos, all her pictures, everything. There was like 46 total. And so they charge him with 16 counts of all kinds of craziness. They have all kinds of crazy laws over there. And the long and short of it is it's a high five moment, right? Most agencies are like, man, that's awesome. You got an international guy, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. It's fantastic. I was like, but the case ain't over. I was like, now we're just going to get into it. Now we got to do forensics and figure out who, if he's doing it to my kid in Texas, what's he doing with anybody else?
There's many more.
Yeah. There was about 10,000 victims in this guy's world. And so those 10,000 victims realistically came down to about 7,500, 8,000 actual victims of who he's reaching out to. This guy was an admin on 161 different online accounts. He happened to work on a cruise line for a number of years. And so anywhere that he went to port, there were victims. And so here in the U.S., it broke down to a bunch of victims. Actual, like, case ability filing victims was in the 400 range, 3 here in Texas, outside of my 2 victims. It's by far the biggest case I've ever worked in my life. And that guy, just to answer to your original question, we've identified here in the U.S. 22 additional suspects. And so I was puzzled of how that happened. I'm like, how is this happening? And what we believe, this is still an ongoing thing, even though he's been sentenced, he's in prison for my victims. I believe that he was sharing login credentials with other like-minded people, and he had a target-rich environment. And so it's crazy, but to answer the question, yeah, there's definitely some shadiness that goes on amongst offenders.
With the different penalty grades in different states, is it the state of the victim or is it the state of the offender? How does that work?
It can go kind of both ways, believe it or not. It just depends on who has the better prosecutor's office willing to accept the case. Technically, most of the time it's where a victim is, and that's kind of primarily where we focus efforts. However, because that one particular case went international, it had some reaching abilities. There was far-reaching abilities. Like I developed a suspect here who, at the time, was a prison guard in our state system, and So,
Sarge, in your episode, which the listener has not heard yet, so you talked about you can identify somebody in another country. Mm-hmm. This is a success story of how it all worked out, and you took down a network. Is there a lot of times where it never materializes and the case does not progress like that one?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you think of it from a victim impact situation, and not that we aren't victim focused here, because we are, but the UK is victim focused on a completely higher level than us. For example, they would send me leads. I was the kind of the liaison for every U.S. lead, and then pushing it out to different ICACs. And they had a team of like 24, 26 people on a task force dealing with nothing but all the other countries. And so they would send me a list and say, hey, this little girl in this city, in this state, was listed as a friend on this bad guy's account, this particular account. Can you send this to a detective, wherever that is, and ask them to go and reach out to that kid, put eyes on that kid, and say, hey, why were you listed as a friend? And I tried to explain to him, I'm like, listen, there's so much work in ICAC. I'm like, if I don't have something that's chargeable that I could give them, like, hey, there's content, there's communication, there's something that could be case filing, I'm like, it's the lowest priority there is. Not that it's a bad priority, it's just very low on the totem pole to say, I need you to go reach out and ask a kid why she's a friend on this guy's list. She may not even know that, or maybe she does or doesn't, but we don't have the resources or the manpower or the time to push that out. And quite honestly, it would be a low priority for me if somebody did that to me. So it's an evolution, and I had to explain to those guys internationally, like, I would love to do that. It's just not feasible. So if you give me something where there's contraband or content, absolutely, we're going to put eyes on that kid. And the rest will get identified in time. Does that make sense?
No, perfect sense. So You talked about one case that it was a success story. All of these cases probably hit you in different ways from an emotional standpoint, just looking at humanity in a different way standpoint. Can you talk about a couple of cases that in your 18 years of doing this have really just kind of stuck with you?
Yeah, there's one I can tell you that happened sort of early on. And the reason it sticks with me is because I was late to the game. I didn't learn about it fast enough, and I couldn't take action fast enough. And as a result, a child was victimized by an offender who came here from another state. There was all the communications, anything that took place. This kid was groomed online by this person and made it here, offended on the child before I was aware of it. And obviously once we're aware of it, we took every step and action we could and, filed what we could federally, and he ultimately ended up going to prison. But I took it as a failure, and I felt responsible for it because I thought, the deal is nobody wants that on their plate.
It's a survivor's guilt mentality. Yeah, you felt you could have done more.
And so that was one very early on. I mean, I was glad that I got the guy, but I like internalized the victim aspect of it with that. Then I had another several years later that involved a suspect who had already previously been convicted and was a registered sex offender, and made the case, filed the case, put the guy in jail. Felt very good about things, and then there turned out to be some sort of legal goof up, in the indictment versus the charge versus this. And in the grand scheme of things, it should have been a very simple, let's just re-indict, let's just go back, let's supersede and do this. But it was like there was egg on the face for the mistake. And it wasn't, technically it wasn't my mistake. I guess maybe I should have caught what was going on. It was a combination of things between myself and the prosecutor. And as a result, the guy walked, just walked. They let him go and he walked. And I'm like, I was very, very frustrated. I was very unhappy. Like, why aren't we just going back and doing this? We know what happened. Let's fix it and go get the guy who deserves to be locked up for a long time. And it just never happened. And so in my office, I stole the idea from one of the feds. I was a TFO for HSI for a bunch of years, and I saw something in his cubicle one time, and I was like, what is that? And he's like, it's my wall of shame. And he's like, every arrest I make, I take a little photo and I put it up, just a reminder. And I was like, I'm going to steal that idea. That's cool. So literally one wall in my office has a huge, poster like deal of offenders. And he's the only one on my list. And I put their time on their forehead, like if they got fed time or state time or whatever, probation, whatever it may be. And on his, it says freedom on his forehead. And to this day, it chaps me. Content alone, that's a whole nother topic of what I can tolerate at this point. I don't think the public or the average person I don't think the average officer understands the gravity of what content we see. And I'll tell you, there are things that literally haunt me. Like, there are videos that I have seen that absolutely haunt me. The one thing, if there's anybody listening that's in law enforcement that has a desire to get into this arena, I strongly encourage it, because it's very satisfying and rewarding to put someone in a way that will never have the opportunity to hurt another kid.
Absolutely.
I would just recommend the volume. Turn the volume down. Don't listen, because the video in itself is horrific. But when you hear what's going along with the video, it will make your stomach turn. It'll make you throw up.
Oh, yeah, absolutely will.
Just a little over a week ago, we recorded Sergeant Criddle's episode, and she talked about a case where she made the mistake of having the volume up
Yeah.
and heard. And that is still haunts her.
Yeah. It is the things that we will never unsee. You know?
Absolutely.
It sears in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
It literally does. It sears in your brain.
I love Dr. T's line saying the first responder profession is like a bad human experiment. You set somebody down to show them bad image, bad experience over 20 plus years for a career, and you expect them to go out and be normal in the wild, right?
Yeah.
Well, then you take this new layer of this type of offense and these type of images. I mean, really, Sergeant Criddle talked about what she saw dealing with an infant.
Yeah.
And
that's
I
what
just,
mine was too.
yeah. And,
I wouldn't be shocked if it's the same thing.
Probably.
Like, it's very common, the imagery and videos that go around and are passed around and commonly shared.
Yeah.
Like,
It was a viral video.
And you get to the point where you recognize it. As soon as it pops up, you're like, oh, I don't need to look at it. I've already seen it. And that's a sad state of affairs. But, yeah, it's horrific.
well, you've found ways to ground yourself and also just compartmentalize everything. You know, you probably have a lot of lock boxes in your mind from all these years of images. When you first started out to where you are now, did you have to develop skills and to where you saw? I mean, when you first saw your first victim, and then you see something new, and everything's always, it seems like people are trying to one up each other in grotesqueness and just evil.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
How did you have to just continually keep evolving and getting new tools in your mental toolbox to process this?
Yeah, it brings up a good question because it has definitely evolved over time. In the beginning, I would have never vocalized it to really anybody unless it was another ICAC person who could kind of relate. I did, sadly, for my wife and my adult kids, I did share with them, not the graphic details of things, obviously, but, I share with them what I'm experiencing. It came to fruition one day. My wife, she works at the police department as well. She's not an officer, but she works at the police department, and she's a saint, right? But when my youngest was little, she stayed home. She left the PD and stayed home to raise our son, and I fully supported all that. But to kind of make ends meet, she babysat with other kids and stuff. And so I remember coming home from work one day, and I had a really, really crapola day, right? Some stuff I saw was just horrible. And so my avenue to get it out was just to talk about it. Hey, this is kind of what I saw. This is what I'm kind of thinking about. Well, one of the fathers happened to be a youth pastor at our church, was there to pick his kids up. And he just happened to be there picking his boys up. And he's like, hey, man, good to see you. We're just chit-chatting and stuff. And my wife just said, hey, how's your day? And I'm like, oh, my gosh, like, blah. I just vomit everything out. And this guy comes over to me, and he puts his hand on my shoulder, and he's like, can I pray for you right now? And I was like, yeah. So he does. And I realized at that moment, I'm like, holy moly. And I had to call him and apologize. Like, man, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to, vomit all that on you like that. And he's like, I had no idea that stuff even exists. He's like, I peripherally knew what you were doing. And he said, but man, he goes, you're on my prayer list now every day.
Yeah. Well, what you deal with, it's not. So a lot of people, I believe, they think that it's just sexual assault. It's human trafficking for prostitution. It's not just that. It's torture. Yeah. It's defilement. I mean, it's all the above that you have to witness.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. For sure.
And that's just, I can't imagine. The sexual assault is one thing, right, and the physical abuse is one thing, but then when you factor in the very strange and exotic type of evil, as a human, it's hard to wrap your mind around it.
Well, it lends itself because in today's environment, I just go and talk to somebody. There's professionals.
Yeah.
And, the whole room we're sitting in right now is evidence of where police departments are shifting the paradigm to our mental health. Not just me or you, but to everybody as a whole, as a department. it's amazing to me that now we can just go and talk about things and say things openly with no fear of a stigma or ridicule or being made fun of or anything like that, which, you know, you've been around a long time too. I came into this job in 93 and you would never say some of the things back then. You would have been run out of your own agency. Whereas in today's environment, you can be like, holy smokes, I need to decompress a little bit. I think I need to go and talk to someone. It doesn't have to be someone in your department. It could be someone outside the department. There's so many resources available. It's amazing that you can do that. And it's so helpful. Like I'm telling you, it's so helpful. I was not a believer in it in the beginning. I'll be honest. I had to be kind of, you know, pushed in that direction. And my belief on things has changed 100%, a 180 from where I was to where I'm at now.
What got you to change, do you think?
I was a negotiator for our SWAT team for a number of years, and we were mandatold to attend some meetings and some trainings. And I was mandatold to go to a training in Mesquite one time with a guy who was doing a one-day deal, and it was billed to us as the negotiators. There was like 8 of us at the time. Hey, this guy was a negotiator for a long time, and you know, blah blah blah. So we're going into this thinking, hey, this is a negotiator thing. So our team leader's like, all right, everybody, get all your, you know, get your ninja suits on, and we're all going as a team. We're all going to look alike, and blah blah. We're thinking it's negotiator stuff. Like, okay, well, we show up, and I start seeing guys that I know from other agencies going in. It was at the college there in Mesquite, and I see them with like their wives, and there's, you know, I'm like, what's going on? I'm like, what do you got? Why y'all dressed like that? Everybody's, what are you guys, nerds? You
Intervention.
Know? Garland nerds, yeah. I was like, well, what's going on? Well, the speaker was Kevin Gilmartin, Dr. Gilmartin.
Oh, fantastic.
And I'd never heard of the guy, and this guy spoke, and I'm like, I just had this epiphany. I'm like, what? Like, where were you when I was a rookie? Like, why aren't they broadcasting your speech, your topic, your class to every rookie everywhere? And I literally, I at the time was the president of our police association. I went up to him afterwards and I bought his book, which was a little, I forget, some tactical mind, something mindset. I can't remember the.
It's survival. You know, law enforcement, emotional survival for law enforcement.
That's it. Yeah. Sorry, I butchered that.
No, you're good.
Dr.
Sorry, Dr. Gilmartin.
Yeah,
we'll take that out.
But it took all of us to get that.
I bought the book, and I went to him, and I'm like, how do I get you to come to my agency? How much does my association have to pay to get you to come to my agency and speak to everybody? I was like, because it's well worth the money. And unfortunately, we couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, that was the epiphany for me. And I'm like, wow, something billed to me as one thing. It was not that thing at all. He said, hey, in his intro, I was a negotiator for a long time. That was it. That was the only part of negotiations that thing was about. And so from that point forward, I thought, maybe there's something to this. And then because we were negotiators, we were automatically put into a role in our CISM team. And when I first sat through a debrief, and I went into it with the mindset of like, all right, I'm going to be like Dr. Gilmartin. I'm going to go into this with the Gilmartin sense. But I still had my Tony sense of like, man, this is bunk, right? And everybody came in, and it was a major incident that happened for us. And when I sat down, and that we had young bucks, dispatchers, forensics, patrol guys, all the way up to super old heads like me. And the first person to speak out was an old head. And he just said his piece, and then it created this environment of safety and understanding, and it just transcended in a way for me where I was like, whoa.
Times are changing.
Yeah. And I was thinking back to like, dang, I wish we'd have had this when I went on that one call that I still think about from 25 years ago or whatever. And so really that's what did it. That's what did it for me.
That Dr. Gilmartin, we might have been at the same seminar when he came here, because I remember him. It was somewhere here in Dallas. I don't even know how he got signed up for that. Maybe I just wanted a break from the streets for a day or two. So great, Tom Popkin and I, we go, and both of us are sitting by each other, and we were both just he talks about even going back to that Rampart case, you know, in L.A. And it was so fascinating because we had never heard anything like that. And I remember it wasn't just for the officer, and it was for the officer's family.
Right. There were so many spouses in that meeting,
absolutely.
and I was like,
yeah,
I wish I'd have brought mine.
Well, because they're the collateral damage when it comes to the breakdown of our minds.
I went to a wellness retreat in Utah. I was kind of hand-picked to go to this deal, and it was amazing. Simply from where I got to stay in an amazing property that used to be owned by Mrs. Fields way back in the day in the 80s, the Cookie Lady. She had this amazing, like, $45 million property. Like, it was amazing.
It was like the Willy Wonka chocolate factory.
It was unbelievable, man.
Did you get free cookies every day?
It wasn't her house anymore.
A house made of cookies.
It's been sold, but it was billed as soon as I got there. Oh, Mrs. Fields built this house. And I'm like, what? Like, the cookie business pays apparently very well. Anyway, the location was amazing, but the content of what was there, it was like a pick your brain sort of a thing. And so there was a license. I would butcher whatever her little 3-letter designation is.
You've already offended Dr. Gilmartin.
Yeah.
It's okay. No,
whatever. LPC. She wasn't that. She was higher than that.
Yeah.
Like, she was a couple levels above that, whatever that is. And she said something in her little presentation that has stuck with me since. She's like, look, law enforcement in general is seeing things the average human being will never see or experience ever. And so she talked about a decompression time, and she said usually for most cops it's on the drive home. Hey, I'm driving home, I need to kind of get my mind right, I'm going to see my kids, my family, this, that. They're going to want this attention, and we're going to go down here and be like, want to sit on the couch and drink a cold one and watch TV. And she said cops are like snow globes. She's like, you know the snow globe you get and you shake it up and all the snow? She's like, you need time as a cop to let the snow settle. She's like, it's like you're on the way home, you've just left this hot call, something's happened, all of these things are going down. Your snow globe is been shaken so hard, it's just nothing, you can't even see through it. And she said, so use that time to get back until your snow globe is leveled and there's no snow in the air. She goes, then you can interact. Like that expectation needs to be translated to your family. Hey, look, my snow globe's a little jacked right now. I got a little snow in the air. Like, give me 10 minutes. Let me calm things down. And I took so much away from that. I'm like, wow. It was like this little goofy little thing, but it has stuck with me. And I told her, I was like, same thing. I was like, hi, do you ever come to Texas? Like, it was amazing, amazing. So,
well, being part of the ATO and also this wellness unit, I've been able to network with so many different people like that have they have all these this arsenal of tools for first responders and what we deal with, and also not just for us but for our family and getting education. You can never educate enough on this topic, and hell, Ken has changed so much as far as his outlook. I mean, now he calls himself like the CrossFit vegan, that he will tell anybody about counseling and how it's crucial to us.
And our department's the same way. Todd Geary's amazing.
Yeah,
guy.
Todd's a great guy.
It's if anybody's in the right wheelhouse, he's in the right wheelhouse. It's just he just thinks in that way, and thank God for him, because he's a huge asset and resource for us as a department.
Oh, we talk all the time. Yeah, we were texting just last week about something.
Yeah,
so
awesome.
We've had conversations, Joe and I, about mandating therapy for people. Just going and talking to somebody, and that word mandate, like to make it a mandatory thing, kind of turns people off. But I think that if you create that culture to where you've already done it, like you didn't have to. I mean, you had to do it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't something you chose, but that way you establish like a baseline of where you should be in talking to somebody and establishing a relationship. That way, when you get further into your career or later on down the road, somebody. Do you think that benefited you being forced into it? Do you think you would have ever done it on your own?
I would have never done it on my own. Absolutely not. I know in my mind I would have just never done it, because I came from an era where we just didn't do it. But to piggyback off of Gil Martin's ideas and thought process about that, he's like, he gave an example in this deal about if your chief came out today and said, you know what? He goes, everybody knows what the checkerboard hat looks like for Chicago PD. Like their dress uniform has that weird checkerboard. He's like, it's the ugliest hat on the planet. If you're from Chicago PD, I apologize. I agree with him. It is hideous looking, right? And he's like, if your chief came out today and said, guess what? I love that hat. We're all going to wear it. Effective tomorrow, you have to wear that hat everywhere you go. If you're in that squad car, you better have that hat on. When you get out of that squad car, that hat better be on. If it's rain, shine, sleet, wear the hat. What kind of reverberation would that have in your department? People would be like, what? Screw the hat.
Tell me what to do.
Yeah, you can't tell, blah, blah, blah. However, in 2 years, it would just be, why do we wear this dumb hat? I don't know. We've just always done it. And so the theory is the same with this, with CISM, with these, whether you're mandatory to attend. When we first started ours, you did not have to go. If we held a debrief or something was going to happen, you didn't have to go. Now you have to go, but you don't have to participate. And that's the caveat, is like, you got to go. And you don't have to speak. No one's going to call you out. Nobody's going to go tell the chief or the whoever's in charge. That doesn't happen. The secrecy of it is very much intact. Nobody knows what happens unless you're in that room. If you choose to participate, great. And so on some level, yes, I'm glad I was mandated to go do things. A lot of things. Like they forced us to go and work at the suicide crisis hotline. And I did that for 3 or 4 years. Like literally, I would do 2 shifts a month, and it was just what we had to do. I'm thankful today I had to go do that for a number of reasons. But yeah, I think in that space, now we have a mentor program. Now when you become a cop in my city, you literally are assigned a mentor. It's not your FTO. It's just a guy or a gal who can say, hey, you're going to hit this wall. You're going to do this. You're going to experience this. Don't do this. It's just a new concept. And so now it's so ingrained. It's just what happens. And that's the same, I think, that where this is going to go in 5 years.
We had that here previously. The Big Brother program.
Yeah.
And it kind of fell to the wayside. And I pitched it, hey, like, it should be every step of the road. Like, you should have somebody a rank above you or 2 ranks above you that you can go and talk to about any issues that you have. I mean, departmentally was where it would start, right?
Yep.
But your personal life would carry into that. All the trauma you have from here, just natural conversations would start to open up. So my outlook is, if we made it mandatory and only 10% of the people enjoyed it, that's still better than what we're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, you have to start somewhere. It'd be no different than when I remember when I came on, we had a guy who carried a wheel gun. He still carried a wheel gun. And the thought of him having to move from a wheel gun to a Glock messed his OODA loop up so bad. He's like, I got to give up my speed loaders and, this kind of stuff. And I'm like, bro, like you got so much more advantage if you have this other gun. But you'd have thought you were asking him to wear the hat, right? Like, he's like, that was foreign concept. But now nobody would even consider carrying a wheel gun. Well,
like you go in the military, you go, you're not going to carry that musket from the Civil War era. You're going to carry an M16. I like what you said about people don't know any better. It's like when I remember, I'm old enough to remember whenever we went to AVLs on the squad car. Shit, we thought we were just good. It was the end. It was it. It's over. We're going to get indicted for something.
Right.
Well, it's okay. And now, Jessica, we didn't have body cams. We weren't always on camera. If we were, it was some big ass VHS on somebody's shoulder like a boombox,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
And and those tapes may or may not disappear. I'm just kidding. But but now you're always assumed you're being recorded, and it's okay. It actually has helped folks.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So, I like what you said about you make it mandatory, and then after a while, people are gonna. It's like escorting a drunk out of a bar. He's gonna kind of kick and fight on the way out, but it's okay. And after a while, you're not going to know any better. After a certain amount of time, the officer's going to come to work, and it's just the way it is.
It's attrition. The old heads are going to go out, and it's very weird for me to think of myself in that category, but that's right where I'm at. I'm the guy now that young bucks, I tell people all the time when I talk, I was like, in my city, and we're not humongous, but we got a bunch of cops. We're a good-sized city. I used to say I'm fairly certain I could get a ticket in my city before they figured out I worked there. And I'm almost convinced now I could be in handcuffs in the back of a car before someone realized, oh, wait, this guy actually works here. Like, what's going on?
I will say, though, you're very well known and very loud. I'm not saying that just because you're sitting on here on the show, but Dan, he's a K9, a big jacked up.
Lamboris.
Lamboris. Yeah, he loves you. He loves you to death, and he just talks to you.
He's such a good dude.
Yeah, he is good. He's one of our purse bingo models. He comes out there shirtless for the models of purse. Sarge, you come see that this year. And I
have no doubt you got a bunch of donations that night.
Yeah. Too bad he had a girlfriend because he could have
sure
walked away with 10.
Sure.
He's a pretty man. But we work out the same gym and we talk all the time. But I told him I was going to have you on today, and he's like, "Oh God, he's the best." I was like,
he's such a good dude. Oh, I appreciate that. People talk all the time about what your legacy or whatever, and I'm not about the accolades. I'm really not. I just have a passion for this job. I have a passion for what I'm doing, and I feel fortunate. I feel blessed to be with an agency that supports me like that and gives me the opportunity to do this and really do it at whatever pace I want to do it. They're to the point now where they're like, just stay, don't leave. Like, we don't want you to go. And while I get that part of it, I don't want it to go away. And so that's where I'm at this point. Like, you asked in the beginning, how much longer you can do. I'm going to go until I can get somebody trained to do my job. They're not going to be me, and they don't have to be me. I didn't become Bruce. I did a lot of things Bruce did because he was my mentor, but I want to be that mentor. I just want the job to continue. I don't want it to go away.
Right. Well, you're not going to be Detective Godwin forever. You're going to be Tony after this is gone. You take out, when you walk out those doors, you're Tony. And then I'm quite sure you're going to have a nice, whatever you want to do after Garland PD, you can go do with your experience and your your knowledge. Speaking of the knowledge, I'm going to get in the prosecutorial side of these type cases, but is there any kind of common profiles you've seen in the suspects as far as and I know it varies, but is there some common characteristics you've seen in these folks?
The joke is, and I say this knowing that a bunch of people that are going to hear this have never seen me, but I fit the exact profile for an offender, right? Unfortunately, I wear glasses, I have a mustache, goatee, whatever. So in our arena, we call it molest glasses and molest stash, and jokingly, because there is a lot of humor in this business.
You have to
in law enforcement.
If you're not laughing, you're crying.
It's the compartmentalizing of how we do things, and so there are things. If we're going into a house and we see there are 4 adult males living in the home, maybe it's a dad and a couple sons or roommates, cousins, uncles, whatever it may be, we tend to print off some photos of those individuals, and we poll the groups around us. All right, do we pick the perv? Which one do we think? Who's got money on this one? And there tends to be a general look, which is a heavy set white male with glasses, probably thicker than they need to be, and some sort of 1980s mustache. However, that's just the joking side of it, because I've seen it run the gamut. I have dealt with individuals who are muscled up and the most fit person on the planet. I've dealt with the aging grandfather. I've dealt with someone who's in a position of authority, like a teacher or unfortunately a cop. There are bad apples in every aspect, doctors, lawyers. And I think that's one of the stigmas as parents. We do a disservice to our kids. We describe the Freddy Krueger. Don't go near that guy. He looks creepy. Don't go near that guy. But we don't even bat an eye if the guy walks by and he's wearing a sport coat and nice slacks and a pair of dress shoes, but he's just as dangerous as the Freddy Krueger looking guy. So we need to bear in mind the things that happen to kids, the physical things that happen to kids, the familial stuff. It's far more common than people believe. Yes. The person that offends against a child, there's a probably 85% chance they know the person. Mm-hmm. And there's also an 84 to 85% chance they love that person. Yeah. They just want the abuse to stop. They don't want them to go to jail or get in trouble. They just want it to stop. And so when we think of it from that context, same thing with sex offenders, people who are already convicted of these crimes, and they move into a neighborhood. People do their own due diligence. They do research. Oh, I'm thinking about buying a house in this neighborhood. Oh, let me just check the registration, see how many offenders are there. And they put a lot of weight on that, and maybe that's okay. You want to know that. But what about the guy who's next door who's never been caught, but he still does it? Like, we don't put that into context, and I think we should.
I think a lot of people do the Google. I mean, look to see just for it gives them somewhat peace of mind. Yeah. You know, I mean, I could see that, but yeah, it's from a physical standpoint, you give a lot of characteristics. So, are there any kind of, and I know you're not a psychologist, but is there a lot of commonalities with the psyche of these type of folks?
I know I'm going to get some flack for this because I've listened to a few of y'all's
don't
episodes.
Worry, nobody listens anyway, Tony. Don't worry.
I'm going to get I mean from in this room here in a second, because I'm going to say,
oh boy,
there are some characteristics that seem to cross a lot of boundaries, and so when we encounter a subject who has a propensity for kid-related things like sexual offenses or imagery in videos, there is, I don't know why there's a correlation, but there is some correlation between that person and a connection with, like, Star Wars. Mm-hmm. I knew the look was coming. Or Star Trek, swords, Dungeons and Dragons, the
anime,
the
My Little Pony.
Yeah,
the bronies.
Yeah. A brony, or if you're a brony or not a brony, and I know the Star Trek thing is a sensitive topic here.
I'm not Trekkie.
Or Star Wars.
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
Wars, yeah.
Star Wars.
Yeah.
So I know that's a sensitive topic, and I'm not alluding to anything, joking. I'm just saying there does seem to be some correlation, and I don't know why.
I have to agree.
That is really weird.
Thank you for validating.
Wow.
I have to agree.
Huh. Well, I'm going to go pack up a bunch of shit and haul it out. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, anybody that listens knows that's funny. God, wow,
yeah,
that's interesting.
I don't know why that is, honestly. Like, I have a collection of photos from warrants holding swords. Mm-hmm. Swords is I don't know what the connection is, but there is a huge connection. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you, I have probably 25 different photos with various sized swords that are hanging on a wall or in a offender's bedroom and stuff.
Size does matter with swords, though.
Size does matter.
Yeah.
It does.
Yes. They are phallic.
Yes, look at Excalibur. Come on. I don't have I have no swords or of any kind. I do have a Captain America shield hanging on the wall just outside the room. But yeah, no
offense against all you Trekkies and Star Wars.
Do you have
people.
a lightsaber though?
Yeah.
Oh no.
It's in storage, Sarge.
Okay, sure.
I don't wield it. It's a collectable. It's a collectible.
It's okay. We'll have an intervention later.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Chris Hansen.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of that show, so that show, Chris Hansen, the Predator, how is that kind of the first time that this type of investigation and these type of suspects that was kind of put in the spotlight in the world?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, at that time, it was cutting edge.
Yeah.
Outside looking in, you just assume that it's all legit and valid and purposeful and accomplishing the same goals we're accomplishing now. But it was not that at all. Yeah. It was done very haphazardly. It was not done by any standards or rules, and which is why it ultimately came to a close. There are still some things, and Chris Hansen is still a part of that sort of arena, but in a whole another sort of platform.
It was an entertainment value. I mean, you're watching it, and then just seeing the guys getting tackled out in the yard by the SWAT team, but there has been some horror stories from that. I think somebody had went outside and committed suicide. I mean, there's been some.
The thing that busted it wide open happened right here in Texas, in a city just north of mine, where they offered up a location at this particular city and held one of those, 24-hour kind of deals, and a bunch of people showed up. Well, one of the people that showed up was that's not good. One of the people that showed up was a district attorney for a very well-known county. Mm-hmm. And, of course, he didn't go to jail that day, but he was going to be picked up later, and when they went to go get him, he committed suicide. And as a result, that put the focus in a completely different light, and they really examined what was going on, and everybody that a case was filed on didn't get filed on. And so that's what really became a pivotal moment. There's always been comparisons. Oh, you're the catch a predator guy. And like, well, not really, kind of, yes. But, we follow rules. We do things correctly.
You do things from a legality standpoint.
But, Joe Blow citizen has no idea about that. They just see the outside looking in. And that brings up a point that probably needs to be discussed. There are certain groups today in today's environment called vigilante groups, and they have online platforms like YouTube and other Instagrams and places where they are acting as if they are us, and they are setting up people to show up, and they're doing everything themselves internally. And I would say this: one, we don't accept those cases, and when we don't, there's reasons we don't accept those cases. And the downside is the general public doesn't quite get it, because when they see that YouTube video of that predator showing up at a park or a Walmart and then being confronted by these guys or gals that are doing this for the clicks, for the likes, for the monetization of it, and not because it's going to not be prosecuted, it's the shame factor. It's going to create a problem in two ways. One, it's going to create where someone's going to get killed. Somebody's going to show up to one of those meetings and
get a sword
out,
at them. Get a sword at them.
Yeah, they're going to pull their sword out, and next thing you know, they're going to be shish kebab. And
another guy's going to have a bigger sword.
Yeah,
and
some
go
YouTube guy.
Yeah,
he's going to come in with his lightsaber, thinking he can save the world, and not so much.
Captain America shield.
Yeah. Secondarily, when that guy does not get arrested, and I say guy, it's not exclusive to guys; it's primarily guys. But when that guy doesn't catch a case and he goes home, is he going to change his ways? And the short-term answer is sure, for a little while. But then he's going to go right back in. He's going to do the next thing.
Be more careful, maybe.
And what he's going to do now, before he meets, is he's going to victimize a kid, a real kid. Meaning he's going to say, I'm not coming unless you send me this, a nude this, or a video of this. And if you don't, well, I'm just not coming. So in essence, those vigilantes are harming real kids. They just don't get it. They don't understand.
So when it comes to prosecuting these cases, how difficult is it?
It's not super simple. They don't go to trial a lot, I'll tell you that.
Well, yeah.
Because not many of these folks want their business cut up in front of a jury or judge or whatever. I will tell you there are vast differences between state cases being filed and federal cases. I'm not poking the bear at anybody, but I'll tell you I got extremely frustrated with the types of sentences that these suspects were getting after all of the work that was put into getting them, right, locked up. And at that point, after a certain period of time where offenders were getting nothing but probation, I reached a level of like, this is not right. This person deserves time. I'm not saying they all got to go to jail for life. There's case by case, but that's what prompted me to start working more closely with my federal partners. And so once I started doing that, and that's not the end all be all either, but at least the times they are getting for prosecution are pretty severe. As
they should be. But
yeah.
But you think the more education of this and the more frequency of seeing these types of cases for even prosecutors that want to put the bad guy away, and the ripple effect of the victimization is that maybe that's helped in getting
it doesn't
more time?
hurt.
Yeah,
okay. It definitely doesn't hurt. Like when I first started, there were specific DAs that handled these offenses, nobody else. And so then it's run through the evolution. Now it's a pool of people, and then it was just willy-nilly whoever would get one. And so there is an education side of it that if a prosecutor is only handling DWIs or low-level things and all of a sudden gets tossed this case, or is brand new and gets tossed a case of this magnitude, there's an education side of it they just don't get.
You can't do that.
And one of the other things that, if we're talking specifically about, let's say, a possession of child pornography case, right? Those are far and few between. The majority of agencies, that's their bread and butter, between those and cyber tips. You file those cases. One of my frustrations with it, and it's always open for dialogue, and I try to communicate with the prosecutors all I can, is there seems to be an unfairness level in the sense that I have to see it when I encounter it. I have to see it as I forensically go through it. I have to see it as I prepare it for prosecution. I have to see it as it goes through an indictment process. And then it gets presented to the DA's office, and they don't want to see it. They don't want to look at it. And the judges dang sure don't want to look at it. And so from that point forward, unless forced, it doesn't necessarily get viewed. And I understand the fact that, hey, you don't want to look at that and burn your brain like mine is burnt. However, there is value to it, because there's a difference in some of this material that goes back and forth. That I think the average public, and I do public speaking a lot, and the average parent, if I talk about that, they're thinking, oh, what, it's like a 15 or 16-year-old kid. No, I'm talking prepubescent. I'm talking diapers. I'm talking toddlers and diapers. Like, there's a difference, right? And so when you have an offender whose propensity is geared towards toddlers or diaper porn versus a guy that's looking at a 15 or 16-year-old, or what we would call age difficult, we don't go for we don't prosecute those. I don't file cases on those guys unless I absolutely can prove that they believe that is someone younger than what it appears to be. We don't mess around in that arena. We're talking prepubescent stuff. And I just don't think, I think there needs and I know it's going to come across like I'm bagging on the DA's office. I'm not. I just wish they grasp that. I understand the mental health side of it. I don't want to see that, and a judge doesn't want to see it. But there's an importance in seeing it. I think it would have a better outcome on the prosecution side. No, I agree. I mean, in most of what you deal with, you talked about that, about the teenage versus the infants. There's a lot of that. And like what Jessica was talking about in her episode, it was dealing with an infant. Yeah. That was being basically tortured. Yep. And people need to know that is going on right now as we're sitting here somewhere in this county. Absolutely. In this state, in this world, and it yeah. So when it comes to education for the parents, are there some things that parents can look out for as far as sites and apps and that and I know that people are always going to find a way, but can you talk about some of these precautionary Sure. I'll start by saying we're never going to arrest our way out of this problem, ever. It's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. And so the way to change the paradigm of this is education and awareness. And that's really key. That's really vital, in my opinion, to change how this works. We need to, same way with mental health in this setting, we need to change the paradigm so that 5 years from now it's just what we do. Oh, this happened, it's an automatic. That's what we do because we do. And so the best advice I can give parents, and I give it often, is if something happens in your home, if something happens in your household, don't freak out, don't panic. Yeah. It's not the end of the world, right? It may seem like it's the end of the world. It may seem like the most devastating thing or experience you're ever going through, but don't freak out. Mm-hmm. Your kid expects you to freak out. That's why your kid's not going to come and tell you, because they think they're going to lose this coveted device and it's going to feel like their arm was amputated, right? Because that's what it would be like if you pull a phone from a kid today in today's environment or climate. So the key is don't freak out. I told you earlier there's differences of what happens. Moms react differently than dads. If a dad intercepts something, dads often have the sense to call the person and say, hey, I have my flamethrower and sickle, and I'm on my way to your house to cut your head off and burn your home to the ground, sir. I'm on my way. Stand by. Or just show up. Or get on there and start talking to the offender to say, I'm calling the cops, you loser, you pervert, you this, you that. A lot of cuss words go in there usually. And that's the wrong thing to do. That is absolutely the wrong thing to do. Do not put yourself in a position that's going to ultimately come back and bite you and potentially catch a case for you. You don't want that. Or ruin your case. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Moms have a tendency to do a couple things. One, if it's communications oriented they have a tendency to continue talking as though they are their child. And that is absolutely the wrong thing to do. Do not engage with a suspect. Do not think you're helping the police by doing that, because you're not. You're actually putting a big wedge in the case. You're getting an automatic defense for that person who can then say, oh, I knew this was fantasy. I knew this was role play. I knew it was the mom the whole time. Even though we know that's not the case, it builds that up automatically.
Get reasonable doubt.
So do not do that, right? Do not, if imagery is involved. Say, for example, a young female has been coerced to send imagery or videos to some person, and that person has sent imagery back. I've seen moms in the past that want to get that imagery off of their child's phone, so they forward it to their own phone so they can delete it from the child's phone. Do not do that, because one, that is a crime.
Right.
If those images are of your 12 or 13-year-old child, you just distributed child pornography. By statute, that's a crime. Do not do that. Do not ever email it to the detective, right? Oh, I found this on my daughter's device or my son's device, and I'm going to email this to you so you have it. Do not do that. That is a crime. You don't want to become a suspect in a crime when you are trying to do the right thing. I know this is a novel concept, but take the device away from your child. As hard as it may seem, and I've had parents say, I need to be able to get in touch with my child. Okay, well, you know what? Pull out one of them flip phones and charge it up, and get a month's worth of prepay on the device that they can only call and program only your number in there, and you'll be fine. You know, this is going to be gone for a little while. Take the device, right? At that point, let us do our job and report it to the police. Most of the time it doesn't happen. I've seen situations with cultural things. Hey, we're just going to take care of this. I literally had a case that involved a church that held what's called a tribunal to resolve a matter between an adult and a child, and just craziness like that. Let us do the job. Let us build the best case that we can absolutely build and move forward accordingly. We have resources, we have contacts, we have information. We can put that child and that family back on the path of empowering them to not make poor decisions in the future, if that's what's being a part of the course.
So I listened to one of your. We're going to get into your podcast in a minute, but I listened to one of them, and there's all these common nicknames and these little, twink. Can you kind of talk talk about some of these, that way they kind of educate some of the parents out there?
Yeah, I wouldn't normally recommend for parents, but I would get well versed in a thing called the Urban Dictionary. If they hear terminology or they hear their kids say something, that's so cap or whatever.
Sus.
Yeah. Things of that nature. The term you use, twink, in that arena, it's definitely a term that's used. It's essentially a young hairless male is what that references. In that environment, I would be a bear. You would be a bear. You might not be a bear. You would probably be a twonk. There is a twonk.
He's pointing at Kent. He's a twonk.
Yeah. No, that was definitely. You got me on that one. I was trying to just cruise through that without any. All right, thanks.
And so there is a bunch of that.
We can edit that out. Hopefully,
we see the term POS. And so we think POS, we know that one, right? We've used it all the time as cops, but it's not what we think. That means, hey, I'm talking my parents over my shoulder. So now there's also things like, and it's evolved. That's a more old school thing when they're on the computer, right? And so they could change screens very quick. Alt-Tab on a keyboard will change a window, like just that quickly. So if a kid's at home on a laptop doing homework, or you think they're doing homework and you spot check and you look over, they probably have a window open that has their homework, right? Or their research paper or whatever they're doing. But if you Alt-Tab on that keyboard, you're going to see maybe another window pop up that doesn't contain, has sites and things like that may not be so great. Same on a phone. Say Instagram is a very big popular thing with kids, right? They have a fake Instagram, they have a real Instagram. Finsta versus Rinsta is what we they kind of call it. And so it's very simple. If you're on an Instagram page and you hold your thumb down on your lower right profile picture or image,
It'll switch over.
It'll just switch over, and that's how easy it is to switch things back over. So parents need to educate themselves about the technology, and we're going to talk about the podcast, and I'll tell you a really great resource they can use to educate themselves.
All right, your podcast. Tell it, Catfish Cops. Can you tell the listener about when it got started and what its original mission is and what it's evolved to, and what are you trying to?
So the evolution of it. I have a brother who's retired from Las Vegas Metro, and I had conversations with him early on about stuff. He used to always be on me, you should write a book. And I was like, whatever. Like, I don't know how to do all that. And so then he's very non-technical, right? He doesn't understand technology at all, but he said to me, like, hey, you should do a podcast. And at the time I was like, what the heck's a podcast? I don't even know what that is. And he's like, oh, dude, you can plug in like anything you have an interest in. You can listen to it. He's like, it's great. And he goes, as many stories as you got, you should do that. And I was like, oh, well, that's cool. I'll look into it. And I did. I researched podcasts and I started listening, and I don't think I've listened to regular radio in 6 or 7 years. And so myself and my podcast partner, Brandon, we talked about it. We said, man, we should do this. We should do this. And we went back and forth about when and what to call it, all these different things. And I finally this was back in like 2019. We were having these conversations about it. And so I'm researching the heck out of it. I'm one of those, I dive in head first and it's over. And so I dive in, and I'm one to just jump off the ledge versus like doing all this assessment evaluation.
Right.
And so I looked up all the equipment, and then I just jumped off the ledge and I bought it all. I told my wife, hey, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to buy this equipment, and here's where we're going to go. And this was getting into 2020, right? Pre-COVID. And we were supposed to launch right before that. We're on the first part of January 2020. And then COVID hit, and then a few other things hit, and we maybe not. Well, then we were invited to go on to a YouTube page, kind of as a education piece, and it was 2 retired homicide guys from somewhere else. And it was called Profiling Evil. And so they asked us to come on, and we teach outside of here, so it was all part of that. And then we went on this live deal. And prior to the show starting, the guy was like, hey, do you want to launch? You got anything you're hawking, a book or anything? I was like, well, we have this podcast. He's like, cool, let's launch it. So we literally launched it that night on that live episode. And because he told me, he's like, hey, we're going to have 25,000 people watching this. Like, why not push it out? I'm like, okay. And so we did. And that was August of 2020. The idea behind it was initially underlying issue. We wanted to educate and raise awareness. That's ultimately what it was for. It began as storytelling and, war stories and things of that nature, because everywhere we go, everything we do, we're always asked about, hey, tell us one of this. And people don't believe the stories. And so we would be telling these. And so it kind of started as that. We sucked at it in the beginning. I'm not going to lie. Our first 2 or 3 are terrible. But nonetheless,
I know the feeling. We still suck. So.
But it evolved, and then we started interviewing people, and we started bringing in other ICAC people, and we want to highlight other people's good work all around the world. And then the education side of it, the component for education and raising awareness. And that's really our catalyst for what we do. And we've developed the website. Catfishcops.com is the website. And we have a resource page, and you can go to the resource page. And we've partnered with a lot of people, one being the Carly Ryan Foundation. That's Sonia Ryan. Her daughter Carly is the one that was murdered in Australia. And it's a one-stop shop. Like, if parents have questions about third-party apps or victim resources or monitoring programs, just go to our website, catfishcops.com/resources, and you'll see it. It's a one-stop shop. If you don't know what TikTok is, if you're one of those hidden parents, head in the sand, go there, click on it, and there's a one-page document that tells you everything about it. You can go to the flip side of it and see, hey, here's some appropriate settings for your kid's phone. Go to your kid's phone. Here's a picture. Do this, do this, do this. This is the safest way you can let them use this tool. And so that's really what it's about for us. We just want to raise awareness and educate people and really just empower people to, push through.
No, that's amazing. We we all start something for a reason. We have a mission, and when we started this podcast, it was for a reason to bring up awareness and to learn from stories and to educate and inspire and motivate, however you want to call it. But it does evolve. At the very least, you'll get pure entertainment. And hearing you and your and Brandon, hearing y'all chat and the banter, it's that right there alone. But then when you break down the actual content, you will get educated in something that honestly, the very high majority of the population, they don't know about this.
No, they don't.
They want to know, but they don't know where to look.
Right. And I'll tell you honestly, what blew my mind about the podcast is I honestly thought we'd have 25 listeners, and then it'd fizzle out in about 2 or 3 months. However, the reach that it has had is amazing to me. Like, what you don't understand about podcasting is you see a lot of the analytics about who's watching on what devices, on what platforms, what countries, what cities, what states, and that's what blows my mind. Like, to think that within 2 years, going on our 3rd year now, we've crested almost 150,000 downloads. Like, to me, that I'm like, what the what?
And honestly, I'll say to the listener, downloads don't even encompass listens or plays, right? Because it's so hard to quantify, right? Stream, because I don't download anything. I'm sorry, I'd probably do my own podcast a disservice. I don't download. I just play or listen. And every single Spotify, Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, they all calculate them differently, but the only thing you can get some kind of semblance of accuracy is downloads. Correct. And they have to be verified through the lab. Right. Yeah, they have to be verified, but even that is not accurate. So when he's saying he's got 150,000 downloads, like, you do not know how many people are listening across the world, not just the United States, but across the world.
And that's what threw me was we had a listener reach out to us from Cambodia. Yeah. And there was another one that was listed from a country I've never even heard of. I had to look it up on a map to figure out where it was. I'm like, what? And they're like, hey, we heard your podcast. And I'm always like, how? How did you hear about us? How did you get to it? Oh, this. You know, I talked to this person. I was at a conference, saw this or whatever, saw a webinar you did. And that just blows my mind. But that was a game changer for us because that person from Cambodia, reached out to say, hey, quit soft soaping things. Like, tell it the way it is, because people need to hear the reality. You know, we try to be as correct as we can, and we
want to be respectful.
We do, and we don't do it for the shock and awe, even though there is shock and awe in almost all of it. However, it's just one of those deals where, you know, we try to be diligent about things and just make people aware of what's going on, but sometimes it comes at a cost. And ours, you'll see, we give a warning like, hey, this is not kid friendly. Don't let your kids listen to
I don't listen to yours when Carmen's in the car. So
I don't blame you. There are some episodes where you can listen. We've done interviews with our own family, our own kids, things of that nature. But
so why the name Catfish Cops?
So that evolved over time as well. We were trying to figure out what was going on, and the crux of it is, like, that's what we do every day. We are online catfishing people, and I know there's a whole TV show that's geared towards that. Honestly, I didn't even know that TV show existed when we first came up with the idea with this. The logo is a combination of a drawing that I did between myself and Brandon's wife. She's an amazing artist, and so I did a version, and she did a couple iterations, and then I stole something from one she did, and then so we got this kind of combined deal. We actually went into this heads up and forward thinking, so we trademarked our logo and we trademarked our name and all of the things that we may not have thought of. But like I said, I did a ton of research about longevity. You know, a lot of people think, oh man, you must make a killing off that. We don't make a dime off of it.
No,
we lose money.
Same.
Yeah, we absolutely lose money on the deal. And it was never about the money. It was never even about the potential for that, because there's always that potential down the road. But that's just not what it's about for us. We're not looking to line our pockets. We're looking to educate people and make change for the better for kids.
What's a way of service too? It's another way of service and continuing your service that you've done for 3 decades.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's almost a full-time job. Like
No.
I'm telling you, I'm jealous of the fact that you guys, I'm telling you, it is almost a full-time job.
No, it is a lot of work behind the scenes, and the preparation and setting these up. And last night I was sitting there typing out a loose flow for this. I wasn't too concerned with your episode because you're a pro at this. You've been doing it longer than I have, and I wasn't worried about you, but there are some that I have to really get. It's not that everybody's not always they always have a good story to tell. It's getting it out of them.
Yeah.
And that's a different, as an interviewer, which I'm not a professional interviewer by any means. Anybody knows me knows that.
Right.
But putting somebody in a comfortable environment to where they feel they can share some of the worst days of their life.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
we do that, and I think we've been very lucky with the evolution of this.
You guys have had some great episodes. I was telling you in the hallway on the way here. I went to Texas State yesterday on the way back. I listened to Shelby Houston's episode, which made me cry like a blubbering baby a second time because I was actually at the funeral of her dad, and to see her get on that stage and just have the courage to say the words that she said was mind blowing. Like it was mind blowing to me. And she's an amazing kid. And I know she's an adult, but I refer to her as a kid. I just see my own kids in her. And anyway, that was empowering, man.
She's an inspiration to humanity. Gosh. I mean, really, that's what And I was so nervous about. Doing her recording because I'm sitting here with a victim of a fallen officer, the daughter Kent was very nervous too. We were sitting there, and I told Chris Webb and his wife, I said, hey, if you see me start to waver, you need to jump in and help me because I can't fight through getting choked up.
Well, you guys have had some powerful ones. Like I also listened to what was the girl's name? Gretchen.
Oh, Gretchen. Oh, man.
Oh my gosh, that was incredible.
It had a little of everything. Yeah. I mean, she literally has a lifetime of different types of trauma that
you guys are paving the path, man. This is it's encouraging for me as a fan of podcasts. It's work. It's more work than anybody ever knows, but there's so much value in it.
When I get messages from people that are way out of the country, from different parts of the country and out of the country, it is so rewarding to hear things. And I got so many messages on Gretchen's episode, and we just released Joey's episode and I'm getting messages from people I didn't even know listen that are close to me that I don't know listen. They reach out. It's surprising. It's rewarding, and it's motivation to keep going. And I know you feel the same way.
Yeah, it is. It is rewarding. It's time consuming and work, but at the end of the day, it's when you hear from those people and validates what you're doing, and you just think, man, like I never would have thought this is what it would have evolved into and what it's brought. But, I'm all about highlighting all the great things people are doing all over the country. And I wish, and I obviously when I retire, whenever that's going to be, it'll be one of my primary focuses. I'll do nothing but that. And I want to just meet as many ICAC people out there as I possibly can. And
they can learn from you. You can be a mentor from in retirement for generations of ICAC detectives.
Yeah, hopefully. It feels like there's a shelf life to it because technology evolves and all that kind of stuff, but I think the foundational stuff is great. And that's where I'm at sort of in my career now. I like really just one aspect of it now. I like the chatting side of it, and I like the teaching side. I want to spread the wealth and spread the wisdom, if there's any wisdom left.
There's plenty of wisdom, and I hope you do. I mean, because this profession and this type of investigative, type of investigation, it needs it. It needs. You're always going to need a mentor, right? So, I have a final topic I want to get on.
Okay.
You just were notified you were going to receive quite an honor for a peace officer, law enforcement in the United States. Can you talk about the phone call that you got and what this is about?
So I received a phone call maybe a month or two ago, probably a couple months at this point, from a guy who told me, "Hey, I'm so and so from the National Law Enforcement Officers Museum, and you've been nominated for an award, a Career Achievement Award in the National Hall of Fame. That's the National Law Enforcement Officers Hall of Fame. It's not a museum. I shouldn't have said museum. It's the National Law Enforcement Officers Hall of Fame.
It's in Ohio?
It's in Toledo, Ohio.
Yeah.
And I got the phone call, and I literally thought it was my buddy Clint messing with me. Like, I was like, who is this? And I was like, how'd you get my number? And I thought it was a
Selling
joke.
Amway?
Yeah, because I'll be quite honest, prior to the phone call, I'd never even heard that I didn't know that it existed. I had never heard of it. And I said, how'd you get my name and number? And the guy gave me my boss's real name. And I thought, oh, wait, this might be legit. He might actually be a legit thing. And he's like, let me send you an email. So he sent me an email that had some information. And I found out that my boss, my lieutenant, my captain, played a role in nominating me for this induction. And so next week, which by the time I guess this gets out, will be months from now.
Yeah.
I don't know. I am going next week to receive that honor in Toledo, Ohio. My family's all going up there. My brother's coming in from out of state. And, I'm very humbled. Honestly, I'm very humbled. I know, and the story I shared earlier about the little girl that self-reported, that's a big component of why I'm getting this award. And, I mean, I'm just honored and grateful to the police department, for Garland PD, to allow me the flexibility to do what I'm doing, and it's never again for any kind of accolades, but I get a lot of ribbing in the halls about this as well. Like one guy walks by and he just bows. He's like, he's like, I don't know anybody in the Hall of Fame, and I'm like, well, I'm not in it yet.
Yeah.
So
they could change their minds.
Is it fair for us to call you Tony the Goat Godwin?
Oh, that's what I'm gonna title this episode.
Oh my gosh, that's very
You're
humbling
goat in
as well.
policing now.
I guess, yeah. I don't know. I'm excited. It'll be fun. And the guy actually called me the other day, and he's like, "Hey, you got your speech written yet?" And I was like, "What?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "Oh no, you're gonna have to give a little speech." I was like, man, I can talk the paint off a wall. I was like, I'll be all right.
I'm good.
He's like, trust me, write it down. That's
Yeah.
what he told me. I was like, oh, the voice of experience here for this. So, it'll be fun. I'm super grateful. And I remember calling my boss afterwards going, what did you do? What did you do to me? Yeah.
No, that's incredible. People like you in this profession, and none of us, sometimes we get awards, they're unexpected. We don't see it coming.
Right.
And look at all the lives that you touched, not just the victims, their families, the relatives of the victims,
right.
The far-reaching, the amount of officers that you touched and trained so they can spiderweb out the success and helping
right.
people. You got to think about that. That is worth... that no award can thank you enough for what you've done and what you're going to continue to do for this profession and especially for this type of investigation. Right. It's important, and it's not for everybody. I mean,
that's true.
It's not for everybody, but it needs to be done to get some kind of justice, and that's why what haunts you all these years is you don't feel that you got justice on that one case of the guy that has freedom on his face.
Exactly.
Because he doesn't deserve freedom, to be honest. So
that is true.
Well, I think this is a perfect way to wrap it up. I think we're over 2 hours.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. See?
Man, I'm sorry.
No. I love it. No, it's perfect. We could have gone another hour easily, but
right.
I want to thank you for coming on. Thank you for being the Hall of Fame professional that you are.
I appreciate that.
And superstar detective. And you're willing to take on being a mentor for many others, and that's admirable in itself. Of you wanting to make other people better. Absolutely. You want to save lives, but make them better. That says a lot about you.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and I tell you all to keep plugging away, man. I love what you're doing, and I'm a big fan. I'm a big listener.
Thank you.
First-time caller, long-time listener.
Yeah. Well, go to www.catfishcops.com.
Yep.
to look up any information on what they've got out there. I want to look a little deeper, and I want to spread that. When I put this episode out, but even leading up to it, I do a bunch of teasers, and I do want pictures of you at the Hall of Fame. The banquet, please.
I'm sure my wife will be taking plenty of those.
Yeah, and wear a nice suit. Come on,
yes,
don't wear the Hawaiian shirt with the flip flops.
Actually, ran into our city attorney at the suit store. He's like, "What are you doing here?" I was like, "I got this award. I got to wear a suit."
Yeah. Listeners, check out Catfish Cop podcast. It's amazing. These guys have so much knowledge they're putting out on us, and it's needed. We need to hear it. It is not but you won't find out about the best lakes for catfish fishing or noodling out in Oklahoma. You will not find out about information on that, but you will find out actually real information that could save your family's lives, and
hopefully,
yeah.
Hope so.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey Mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. Down when you're lonely, I'll pull you up. Life leaves you heavy when the going gets tough. I'll be your shoulder, together we'll run. Up from the bottom, yeah, we'll rise above. Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey Mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. Sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey Mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far, for the gold and the blue, I'll never give up on you.